and it is Men's Mental Health Month. And I couldn't be more excited about it because we are finally bringing to the light, hold on, we are finally bringing to the light some of these discussions that we need to have as men, some of the things that we need to debunk, to learn, relearn, unlearn as men. And I'm gonna have a great guest on tonight. One of the things that I've noticed or I've been hearing frequently, like over the past 5 years, I've been hearing this quite often from men and women, is that we do not have enough men out here. So, what does that mean? Like, we have a lot of adult males. We have a lot adult males of the human species, but we don't have enough men. So, I want to bring on my next guest, Doc Rob himself, Mr. Robert Saba Utley. I call him a historian. He's been given all of the gems pre-slavery. We say we come from kings and queens. Well, he knows the names of these kings and queens. That's a powerful thing instead of just generalizing it. And I can't wait to hear what my guy has to say on tonight's topic. We're going to discuss the rites of passage. A lot of us, as boys, we have not been shown what it is to be a man. We have not been taught what it is to be a man. Although it's popular that only men can raise men. So where is this disconnect? What is happening? Let's bring our next guest on, Mr. Robert Saba Utley. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm very excited. I appreciate you having me on here, big brother Pratt. Yes, rites of passage. It's hard to have any expectations without there any being true lessons ever being taught. So, I think you are onto something there. I think about um, rites of passage.
Mhm.
This is a process taking boys to men.
Love
And I know we have no problem associating, like, to become a doctor there is a lot of study a person must go through.
it.
To become a lawyer, there's also a lot of study a person has to go through. So the question becomes, what type of studying have boys went through to become these men that, I guess, as you were saying, women are saying are lacking in today's society? Not know I heard from my dad or I saw my uncle do. What type of studying, what type of processes has a person went through, and then been given the blessings by the elders, by the community, to be considered a man? I think
Mm.
until processes are actually exhibited, what expectations are there true to really be had of these boys to men?
Mm. Great questions. Great
Hmm.
questions. And that's what I want to debunk because even I could say it too, but there were a few things that like if I be like you're not being a man right now. Okay, can we explain, in that situation, how are you acting outside of male character, of man like character? Like it's for me in my experience it's been situational, but uh, I want this to be, and we've talked enough off camera. I know you got like you got your shit fine tuned of rites of passage. First of all, I want to thank everybody that's here in the building, and we're gonna get straight to the juice. Shout out to y'all. Shout out to y'all for being here. You know what I'm saying? I hope y'all got y'all popcorn and y'all pen and pads because it's about to get real. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So first, the first thing I want to ask is, what does the phrase "rites of passage" mean to you personally?
So, rites of passage is, if we just stick with the number seven, for example, from birth to seven, to be honest with you, these are the opportunities for parents or elders within the community or guardians to help a child understand its actual being. This is not forcing information because it's a great experiment. Like, when you hand out multiple seeds, the question then becomes, would that sunflower seed or would that orange seed ever try to be anything else other than a sunflower or an orange? Everything that sunflower seed or that orange seed is ever going to become is already within itself.
Mm,
So from 0 to 7, are these seeds, are these children in environments where they're being embraced to exhibit who they are? And that's the first rites of passage, is helping a seed understand exactly what type of seed it is.
oh, oh,
And then the next 7 years, from 7 to 14, these are what you would call, some could say the word puberty, teenagers. But from
mhm,
14, now that this seed understands what type of seed it is, now it needs to be introduced to the community. And then going to be then given reasons. What is your responsibility to the community?
mm,
So now that seed understands what it is, who he is, who she is. Now it's now time to see what you're going to do to within the community. And then from 14 to 21, now you're actually been given responsibilities to shine, to live out your purpose within your community.
mm,
And then as we move beyond that stage, you go to the next rites of passage. Now you're in a position where you are now a senior in your realm. That's when you kind of reach back and then begin to help others within the community, the next generation, or the generation coming after you, to also go through those rites of passage, to give them purpose, to give them meaning, and then help them to understand exactly who they are, and then give them the opportunity to then in return get ready to then contribute to the community, to society. Once you complete
mhm,
that rites of passage, then you're looking at, eldership. And the elders, really their responsibility is to then begin to learn all the ills, all the problems within their community. So they need to see exactly where we are actually going wrong as a society and moving forward. The elder responsibility is to learn those, because when they're preparing for the next rites of passage, which is ancestorship, now when you become an ancestor, you're amongst other ancestors. And
mm,
then figuring out, here's the problems I figured out as an elder. And then the ancestors are figuring out which one of these ancestors has the actual cure to those problems. That's how the choice on who comes back is made, because of the elder that just came to return that sort of questionnaire and answers of what's actually going on within the community. So
mhm,
these are typical rites of passage when you're talking about Igbo or Yoruba societies, but at the same time, many other African nations do practice the rites of passage similar to that. Those the Dagara people. So these are rites of passage that I think is kind of missing in society, because most people turn to the age 30 and 40 and still having questions on who they are and really what their purpose are. So they haven't really went through a rites of passage. And these are sometimes the men that are not perceived as being men, because again, they haven't really went through that rites of passage. So again, it's really not 100% their fault, because again, where was the education of self? Where was the introduction to the community? Where was the responsibilities laid on their shoulders to actually exhibit? So that's kind of a rites of passage that I speak of when I say rites of passage.
Message.
We gonna be dropping that throughout the whole. I love that how you broke it down in terms of seven. I heard that seven is a perfect number. In terms of seven, so from one to seven, it really shows like that youthful, that that child who's kind of like try everything, you know what I'm saying, and then that adolescent, your young adolescent realm is you usually get the rebellious teen. It's just they trying to figure out, okay, what I know to be and what I'm told to be is colliding, and then the societal expectation is come 18, you're an adult, you should know everything. You should already know everything as an adult person. You should already know everything and just flow into it when just the day before you're a teen, you're a child, not in my house, and you know, and then furthermore, the older you get, the more expectation there is of you to be together, but nobody really lays out what it is to be wholesome as a man. And then you go now, it's a lot of falsified advice from other guys who are just trying to figure it out. And it might have worked for you, but that ain't a blueprint across the board for all guys. Like, so a lot of guys are trying to live up to an identity that don't match them, and then wonder why they're getting the response that they're getting, even though they can consider themselves as great people. I know quite a few men that are great people, but as far as like, if you was to ask me, I'm like, I know as a man, I wouldn't move that way. I can't, sometimes I can't pinpoint and be like, hey, that's not manly of you on everything. It's more so just me like, I wouldn't move that way. And, you know, being in the master realm, knowing how cause and effect, a lot of times the younger generation, it's not even the younger generation, it's just guys in general. It's men's mental health month. I'm gonna stick to the men. A lot of the a lot of my guys don't really see in full their part that they play in the responses that they receive. And the responses that they receive is telling them that they're being less of a man. And it's like, well, how is this? So there's a whole lot of miscommunication and disconnect. And I really want to target the youth because I'm looking at like my younger brother, and his peers, like his cousins and stuff like that around his age. I'm looking at every day. I'm like, we haven't gotten past sagging yet. Like, like just small stuff that is also pretty pivotal, if you ask me. Like I don't think I ain't gonna go that far on there, but in your experience, Doc Rob, what are the essential elements of a meaningful rites of passage?
Um, so like as you were speaking, I think we've kind of heard this phrase before. If you can't give a man love, give him something to hope for. And if you can't give him
Mm,
something, just give him something to do. So a man has to stay busy for the most part. That's where a lot of our peace essentially comes from. But when you're speaking about that rebellion
mhm,
happens when something is not sitting right within your spirit.
mm,
So I know a lot of times I have taught my kids, I send you to school to socialize, but I educate you at home.
yeah,
And a big meaning behind that is education. The true definition of education is to bring that within outward. Going
that's
back
key.
going back to that first rites of passage, your first 7 years is to understand Your purpose. Why are you here? Who and like we talk about reincarnation or the Yoruba traditions about ancestorship back to birth. It's just like, who is this person who has come back? So you always got to have purpose.
Mm,
And if that person doesn't match your spirit, of course, that's where this rebellion comes from.
mm,
So it's hard for us, again, as parents, as guardians, as teachers, to first dealing with the youth, if to cast expectations without first knowing who that child is.
mm,
So again, if we go through each one of these rites of passage, then a child is going to know who they are before they, really out of elementary school. A child is going to know who and what they're going to be doing within the community before they're out of their teens.
mm-hmm,
How then would be active in contributing back to society. Again, that's why each one of these rites of passage has to be complete. Because if not, you're looking at somebody who, when you're looking at somebody that hasn't went through these rites of passage, that's why a grown man can be looked at as a child, as a little boy still.
mm-hmm.
So, you get a lot of people, your daughter being 18 through 21, evidently they're saying 18 is the time to leave the nest. I'm not 100% behind that, but I understand it. But again, if they have no introduction to the community, no introduction of self, no
Mm,
purpose and goals assigned, then again, they're out there just trying to figure it out. And we should not get upset when you left a person to out there just go figure out for themselves. Who knows
right.
what going to return? What's going to return. So that's why I'm big on the educational piece. I'm from a family of educators. I found that to be my purpose, my calling. So yeah, when I go through these conversations with, especially the youth, men specifically, um, I could put together a list of questions. I could put together a group of activities for them to really backtrack and help to find that identification. And once they have that identification, then their whole mind begins to expand on what they now can do with that. And then next thing you have to do as an elder is then, help set that path. Now that they kind of have that understanding of self, then they can go out. So I know a lot of times, a lot of these things have been taken out of schools, for example, not to bash schools, but carpentry, auto mechanics. There's more things to do other than the classroom setting and the lectures and the studying and figuring out who Thomas Jefferson was and what travels did Columbus make. There's more things to be learned. If we're now just focusing on the youth, young men, there's more things that they should understand because I am now also making these extra curriculums to hopefully accommodate, our youth, especially our young men, men of color specifically. That if you don't have any way to identify with your surroundings, I tell people like, economics. The first three letters is eco.
Mm,
Economics is not about money, but again, it's about the your ecology. How do you survive in the society that you find yourself in?
yeah.
So if you have that understanding of where you at, what time of day it is, and what your purpose is, then these are people that come out to be more successful men than others.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that are kept from this education of self.
Mm,
Uh, these are the ones that we seem to be having issues with. These are the men that need to be pulled to the side and really go back to basics. Go
mm,
back, go back to school. And I think these are things that can turn a lot of our young men around and make them into what we would, deem successful men, prosperous.
okay.
Yeah.
That's where I wanted to go. I wanted to ask it's a twofold question. I ask one at a time. How important is the role of a father or mentor in a boy's journey to manhood?
Well, in order to be the man, you first have to beat the man.
Mm,
So a lot of boys don't really feel accomplishment until they beat their father into something.
Mm.
So if it's a game of chess, the father be spanking them up until they finally like, hey, I can't beat a man until I beat the man. Boys are like that. My son specifically was always racing. I'm also coming from a family of racers. You know what I mean? So until my son finally beat me in racing, then he finally felt like he's a man. So having a father in the household is important because again, you can go through various opportunities for the son to beat the father, right? So it's just more opportunities for that to take place. And the more a child does that, or more times that a boy does that, the more does their self-esteem, their feeling of being a man become that more solid. But a man not in the household, okay, mothers can do good to a certain point. I recommend that mothers have some male friends. Uh,
Yes.
and it doesn't always have to be necessarily a father. Again, male guardianship, grandfather. There's a lot of more ways for a child to be exposed to men within their community, within their environment, and the same thing has to be accomplished.
Mm.
So get them into sports or get them into games. Whatever they are excited about. Make sure a male is somewhere around. And again, my honest opinion about that, it's hard to become a man until you beat the man.
Mm. 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 I love that. That leads me into my next question is you kind of answered like so because okay, what advice do you have for the young men who grew up without a strong male figure? A lot of the youth my age and younger have had the absence of a father, right?
Hmm?
And to cater to the phrase that you said, in order to be the man, you first must beat the man. I realize that a lot of my qualities, my characteristics, my goodness, that my morals that I set for myself, my own principles, came from the absence of having a father. So, like for me, it was like, okay, he gave me absence. I'm gonna make sure my presence is felt. I'm gonna make sure that I'm present with those that I love, right? I'm gonna make sure that I show up and be there, you know, especially for the youth around me, right? They don't have to be my seedling for me to want to nurture them, to guide them, to teach them, to see them. You know what I mean? Um,
But if you hear what you're saying, you're still trying to beat the man.
exactly.
Father that was absent, I'm gonna be a better father by being present.
Yeah.
So you still can cover that rites of passage, but again, like I said, there's many other ways that we have to emotionally engage in our behavior, not as a coincidence, but actually a necessary step uh, in our becoming a man. So I know I've said that, I also was brought up with an absentee father.
Mm,
Um, Stepfather, I call him dad because he's the only man that I knew that took on that responsibility. So shout out to my dad. Um, but yeah, it was. I remember those conversations with my brother coming up. Hey, when we have kids, we're gonna be there.
I know that's right.
And I was thinking about this is a great book idea if anyone want to go and run with it. But at one time, I was thinking of a book to write, thinking about calling it "Doing the Right Thing," like Spike Lee, Thang. But that book was necessarily going to be about seeing others try to walk this life, try to walk this thing called manhood, and absolutely within your spirit that it's absolutely wrong. So the way that you learned was not by observing and being taught by these individuals, but you just made it a conscious effort to do the opposite.
Mm,
So, a lot of times we can learn because we know in ourselves how that felt to be abandoned. We know within
correct.
ourselves what that was like to for someone not to, take that time. So that is also sometimes turned to a few within us to say, well, hey, I know how it made me feel. I know I'm not going to make anyone else feel that way.
Right. God. I think you answered it, but I'm gonna ask again just to clarify. What advice do you have for young
Okay.
men who grew up without a strong male figure? I believe you answered it, but I will ask again just to clarify. What advice do you have?
I would say that to work through that emotional stress, find ways that in a safe way that makes you feel good about yourself,
Mm,
because ultimately each and every human being has their own thought process. What you're feeling, how can that happen to me? um why would somebody do somebody like that? We can't answer those questions for others. We can only answer, you know how we respond and how we live our lives. So first I say, there's an opportunity for you to kind of bind yourself up and get over that. But understand again that everyone has their own choice, their own life that they're making for themselves. So now you got to sit up and just say, okay, well, okay, now wipe that last tear away, and it's just like, so now how am I going to live my life? These become necessary steps for boys to go into manhood, even if they don't have what we would consider that prime example within the home.
mhm,
Is you still have to overcome what is going to be your ties to the community, what is going to be your ties to your family, what are going to be the things that you're going to make happen. And I like to say, and you have to manifest these things. Now, I say the word manifest. I know it's kind of being thrown out there in social media right now.
mhm,
It may have lost its meaning, but I'm gonna try to what it means to me, because prayer usually means something external of yourself.
mhm,
I hope this happens. I pray
mhm,
it happens. Even though you don't pray for money in real life, because you got to get up and go to that job in order for that money transaction to take place. So prayer works in that sense to hope that something comes good one day. But I always go with manifestations because, real simple, the equation for manifestation: thought plus action equals manifestation,
Okay.
right? So I recall at an early age, uh, nothing could not stop me from manifestations. Everything I said I wanted to do, it got accomplished, because again, it was putting in the necessary steps to go along with that. So again, there's a two, to answer that question more specifically. Like, there's two ways you got to be examining yourself on a continuous basis: the physical you and the spiritual you.
Mm,
Of course, the physical realm is everything that you need to sustain life itself. From the physical body. If you're not working for money, well, how's the food get? You know what I mean? So whatever it takes for you to keep alive physically, that's the physical realm. And
mhm,
that's where you just got to make just honest decisions about how to self-sustain yourself. And then the spiritual side of yourself, that's where I think a lot of times I often say we're taught religion before we taught humanity, our own humanity and our spirituality.
mm,
So sometimes we don't even know how to address the spiritual realm. um, but once you begin to go through that understanding of, when you can close your eyes, when you can close your ears, and you can talk to your inner self, and there's communications, you hear a voice, that's that spiritual within you that we have not been, kind of given advice how to deal with.
mm,
Because when you go into any ancient temple in Africa, the sign above the door is "Man, know thyself." That's the first step.
Right.
We haven't even got to, inside the temple yet. That's like you gotta know that before you even cross the threshold. And you don't have that understanding of what that voice inside of you is. Um, One cool thing about understanding that voice is once you lock in with that voice and have that understanding, um, then you are linked into the universe. And the thing about the universe is the universe gives you everything that you desire.
Correct.
And no other way to act. So, a lot of times we come across resistance and opposition is when we go against that which is naturally or innately us.
Mm, 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 mm. Oh, oh my
So sometimes when we're not yeah, so sometimes when we're not receiving is because I think we've heard this all before, my blessing is my blessing. I think we heard a lot of these phrases before, but it's really saying that if it's not yours, then most times out of 10 it's not going to ever come to you. So yeah, that's kind of thing how I would answer that question. I hope I answered that second question.
God. Yeah, man, because that was leading into another question that I had about basically manhood and masculinity is like what qualities truly define a man today and not just like physiologically, you know what I'm saying? It's more of emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So you definitely already done led into that question because I got this boom, boom. Says you will not be able to connect to God without going to Him through His Son Jesus and the Holy Spirit as your helper. What we're dissecting is what you mentioned earlier about the Spirit being within you and this relationship, not religion, right? And life and power and life and death and the power of the tongue. You're not going to have a relationship with God or be able to hear when God speaks, Spirit speaks, if you're distracted by everything else. So getting to know yourself, knowing that God is within, is where you build that connection. It's where you build that relationship. It's where you build your inner peace instead of inner conflict, inner turmoil. So, what qualities truly define a man today? If we had to like choose some,
Okay. So I mean, I thank you for reading out that quote, um, or that comment, and I won't get deep into it, other than just to say that, like how you was talking about earlier when the podcast started, like we went to talk about before slavery.
right?
Um, I like to say too, most of my talks and what I'm kind of want to talk a little bit before prepping into how to respond to that question is there was a time when there was no Bibles,
Right.
right? And we still had great peaceful societies prior to the writing of the Bible, correct?
Right.
So this is really again my kind of focus is again is not I'm not anti anything, anti, which means to go against. A lot of my talking today is probably ante, antichrist, the spirituality systems prior to, right? Um, but at the same time, as Jesus spoke, he came not to change the law, but to fulfill the law.
Mm,
So these are again where we're talking about the universe has no ill wills towards you. You should not have any towards it. These are universal laws. These are things that Jesus, the Christ Himself, was preaching much later. So there was an understanding of spirituality anti-Christianity. So again, this thing that I speak of, this spirit, like it's very ancient. It's very old. But it allowed Africa to have peaceful societies at thousands of years at a time. So
Hmm.
now your question again was, can you say for me again? You said what's the quality of man?
Hmm. What qualities truly define a man today?
I think a true man, by one definition, is master of his emotions.
Yes.
So, because if you want to talk about men being left brain, men being logic,
Hmm.
um, then ultimately a logical decision would not cause harm in any form, fashion, shape, size, right? So, in ancient teachings, the seat of intelligence was the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that heart, from a metaphysical standpoint, was your emotional state of being.
Hmm. Mm.
All men had to first and foremost had to understand what they were feeling and analyze that, and then still able to make the right decision. So that's the logic that I think a lot of men today kind of overlook. I think
Hmm.
they think just by studying and knowing the right answer every single time, and when they speak, they are correct. But if you are harming the spiritual realm, the emotional state of being of yourself and others, then that was not the logical decision to make. You're not as logical as you think you are. Because, first, again, man to me is one who has to first master his emotions.
Hmm. I love that. Man, I love that. And what I've seen in today's society is a lot of guys believe that they are making logical decisions, but don't realize that they're coming from an emotional place, right? And with that, one of the guys that I talked to, he made a great point and said, you know, today's logic is based on emotion. If you did or said what you felt like you needed to say or do, that was based on an emotion, whatever you felt, you know?
Hmm?
So I said, yo, that's profound because what's happening is a lot of guys are getting the message that men don't have emotions versus mastering the emotion, right? And with that miscommunication, it becomes emotional suppression. So a lot of guys are putting on a tough front as if they don't have an emotion or not being emotionally reactive. And because you can say something in an aggressive manner, say something, uh, you know, even tone, or like, like don't have a facial expression or something like that, that you are not being emotional. It's incorrect. You are actually having an emotional reaction to whatever the situation is at hand, and you don't realize that your bluntness is becoming disrespectful, and that's because you yourself have just felt, like a challenge or a shift, or something that hits you. But if you are emotionally detached and emotionally unaware, then you will be emotionally reactive and not even know it. And
So,
not even know it.
so in ancient teachings, there was this thing called atum,
Hmm.
ATUM.
Hmm.
Say that's where we get the word atom from,
Yeah.
OM. That's later where we get Adam from, right?
Hmm.
Adam being human. So the thing about human and atom and Adam is that it's a balance between matter and energy.
Mm,
That is the divine purpose of human beings. You know, a good phrase is, it's not important that we are human. What is important is that we were chosen, divinely chosen, to have a conscience.
mm-hmm,
So this perfect balance that we got to play between matter, we can say the physical, and energy, the emotion, is that you have to be in a position logically to be able to bring forth a balance between the two. You can't have your woman in the household upset and thinking you the master of the house.
mm,
As a man, you got to create a balance between energy, the emotion, and the physical matter. You know what I mean? So if you're not able to balance your workplace stress, your home stress, then that's not necessarily considered manhood.
mm, mm,
So, you know, so again, that going back to that teaching of balance between matter and energy, I think we've discussed this off to the previous times, but from the book of Ani, where it states that, and just an ancient teaching that, similar to like people would be familiar with Proverbs. Proverbs was a book in the Bible said to be written by King Solomon, and it's a father talking to a son. That's all Proverbs is advice from a father to a son.
mm-hmm.
So a proverb from the book of Ani basically is stating, and I'm just going to paraphrase this, where do not order your wife around her house.
Mm,
Do not order her to bring you something when she has made sure that it's in its proper place.
mm,
We know how women like to organize the house. You know what I mean? So she's already made sure everything is in its proper place according to her. So if you know where your socks are located, if you know where the knife is at, you do not be sitting on the couch saying, "Hey, bring me my socks or bring me the knife."
mm,
When she don't spend enough time making sure everything was in its exact perfect place for you to know where it's at and for you to go there and it'll be there.
mm.
And
Sound like leadership.
it goes on to say, and it ends off by saying, you know, by you ordering or demanding, forcing manhood onto your wife, again, not balancing matter and the energy, the emotion, you are basically inciting strife. You know what I mean? You are introducing turmoil into a situation. And if you are a man and you're supposed to be logically fixing a problem, that's how a lot of times people consider, making a logical decision. And we
Yeah.
men, we are destination thinkers. We're problem solvers. And a lot of times we're thinking that that was the cure.
Mm,
But if that decision causes strife, if it causes backlash, if it causes a divide, a division, and you got to understand you haven't mastered your emotions because you have not created a balanced scenario. So that decision was really not the logical decision to make.
yeah.
Message.
Spin. That makes sense because even if like I've had, the arguments or the situations, you know what I mean? And for me, I always say like I like to let's get to the root of the issue to
Hmm.
actually solve the issue. Otherwise we're gonna have this scenario play out again. And, like I don't think nobody chooses or wants to argue, man or woman. I don't think nobody actually wants, like the want is the confusion. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe you haven't communicated properly. Maybe we need to try different words. Maybe we need to, spend some, have a little space, give each other a little break, whatever it is. But we need to, as like, hey, as the man, I'm thinking like let's navigate this thing to a landing because otherwise I don't feel comfortable going to sleep. It ain't her, like it ain't her. It's the turmoil. It's the strife. So if the strife is still lingering, even though, like, say for instance, small scenario like a whole back and forth of who's supposed to cook or who's supposed to take out the trash, right? Those usually are the simple scenarios people bring up. And y'all have a bickering or argument or something unfolds from that, right? Um, what somebody, the guy usually be like, forget it, I'll just do it, but you still upset. You know what I'm saying? Or whoever the one who succumbs to like, I'll just fix it. The problem got resolved, but the matter is still there. The strife is still there. And if we don't handle or address this tension, we neglecting something that is gonna grow. So over time, if you have a whole lot of neglected situations because you think logically, I just handled the problem, but you didn't really get to the root of the problem. So I like how you had expressed that, because there is no balance there. Even though the surface problem has been handled, the balance is still off.
So sometimes, that balance is off because it's not what you did,
Hmm.
how you did it.
Correct.
You took that trash out huffing and puffing. You
Mm.
know what I mean? It's how you. So sometimes that's the balance between the material and the energy. You know what I mean? Like, so the material are things. What you're saying is actually getting done. The trash went out. That's the material. That's physical.
Yeah.
But the energy that was created on whether it was a heated discussion before the trash got took out, back and forth, who was supposed to do it. Well, you didn't have to work today, I did, so I thought maybe you would look out for me this one time, baby. So
Mm.
there's, but again, it's how you went about fixing the problem. You got to understand that that's going to have an impact too.
Correct.
So as a man, the balance is your responsibility. So if you did it incorrectly, even though you did it, restore that balance.
Mm. Mm.
Is that
I'm
is
taking notes.
that too much on the man?
Not if you ask me. All right, we got some comments. It said, you still war with demonic spirits when you are simply calm, and the only reason the war happens is due to irritated spirits attached to the other person because of the presence of God. Says trauma triggers associated with unhealed trauma that regurgitates into the new relationship that they have not healed from their past ones. A lot of people bring old baggage into new relationships. Says the trash, unhealed trauma, was brought into the new house. Mm.
When it comes down to that, there's two things I like to talk to young men about. The first one that kind of relates to that is, do not marry her if you can't carry her.
What you mean by that?
You thought you had a 20-piece luggage set from day one. If you can't carry 20 bags, again, not marry her if you cannot carry her.
Message.
And the second thing would be that it's a man's responsibility to always let the woman know what his full intentions are from Jump Street.
That part.
So the important thing about doing that now, and a woman has a right to always say yes or no to those intentions, right? So, but once you have made your intentions known, hey, I just want to be, friends. I just want, a late night run. I want to be boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, married, whatever your intents are. She needs to know, because what women will begin to do in their mind is shape their whole world around your words.
Mm.
That's why they're going to begin organizing the house a certain way. That's when they're going to begin looking to for certain jobs. That's when they're going to begin to bring certain ornaments into the house because this person wants X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to make sure that this actually comes into existence.
Mm,
And then when they find out later that you lied, but they don't shape this whole world around your original intentions, that's
mm.
also a later strife.
Correct, correct. I see so many set themselves up for that. I was just talking to a brother yesterday. Shout out to being Men's Mental Health Month. It's been an easy opening for me to have the real conversations with men. And I liked having this conversation with this gentleman because it was, I said everything happens for a reason. There's no such thing as a coincidence. So I'm out doing my job. I see this man. I spoke to him before, but he seemed to be walking in my direction, and I was ready to drive off, but something told me to just wait. And he wound up coming to me. He dapped me up. I gave him a hug, and he was like, my father is on hospice, and I said, okay, you know. And I introduced that conversation of, it's Men's Mental Health Month, what we talk about, and he said that his first marriage, he was married for 25 years, and it was hell. I said, "Ooh." He said, "Now my second marriage," he said, he was grateful because that showed him his parts. He took accountability for his things, right? And one of the things that he said was, whatever you did to gain this woman's attention in the beginning is what you're going to have to do to continue to keep this woman. So if you went out your way, speaking to the guys, if you went out your way, you spent all this money on her, you did all these lavish things, you introduced her into a lifestyle. If you didn't have intentions on keeping her that lifestyle, then you were showing her a false ideology, right?
Hmm?
So I loved that part, and just having that conversation with my guy, he you could see that like took his mind away from like what he opened with, like my father's on hospice, like we just waiting on the day basically, and that doesn't necessarily mean what hospice mean, but in his situation, you know, he understood what was going on, and I just love to see how we were able to have that conversation. Possibly one day I'll get him up on here to do the live with us as well, or do something in person. If you're watching, my guy, you know who you are. Can't wait to talk to you some more. Um, but yeah, I thought that was exactly what, like what you said was showing your full intention in the beginning, right? I know plenty of guys. I don't consider them, playboys, but if they are focused on whatever their purpose is or getting themselves what they consider together, like if they are working on something and they tell you, I'm sorry, but I cannot focus on a relationship right now, then they did not steer you or misdirect you. They was being honest and upfront. So you cannot expect this guy to want a relationship from you after he's communicated that that's not where his focus is. Like even though things change, things blossom, I understand, but if he expressed that, then that was his intention. You can work with honest intent.
Well, first and foremost, shout out to the brother that you're speaking of. You know, peace during this transition that he's going through. Um,
That's right. Yes.
so I like to just say this real quick, then get into that, which is death does not end a relationship.
It sure doesn't.
Um, so again, shout out to that brother. Now, when it comes down to what you were just saying, that yeah, most definitely, uh, it went kind of goes back to letting a woman specifically know your intentions from gate, not to just go out and start buying gifts. You know what I mean? And we talk about love language, or like that may not even be her language, right?
Correct.
So could be wrong from the gate. Uh, but again, if you let this woman know your intentions, again, the whole ideal is just balancing yourself out. Now, if you just again, you talked about accountability too. If you've done your part, then however it transpires, as long as you've done your part, you can walk away spiritually strong because I didn't go in with bad intentions. I actually let my intentions be known. You know what I mean? So you should be able to bounce back easy from that. Uh,
Mm,
but yeah, I think. But again, if you did not make those intentions to be known in the beginning, then yeah, like. But again, without an understanding of how that can turn out bad for you, again, going back to the whole introduction point about not being taught,
yes.
we got to understand. Then sometimes lessons are learned on the spot. Sometimes lessons are learned much. Those are hard ways to learn. I do not encourage to send a 18-year-old, a 17-year-old out there in the world, out there in the streets, and say, "Have at it."
Mm,
I wish you nothing but the best. But again, if they are thrown into the jungle, don't be surprised if a wolf comes back out. So or
mm,
so yeah, I think it still boils down to like we have to actually be actively engaged with our youth, our young boys. They have to again be introduced to themselves, to their community.
mm,
To the only way that we're gonna talk about, because we can have a conversation all the day about pick and choose. Why did Johnny do X, Y, and Z? Why did Sam do X, Y, and Z? Why did Tommy do A, B, and C? And we can get lost in these individual cases, but ultimately, as a community, as a whole,
mm,
we don't have a societal system in place and turning these boys into men. Um, Again, we're releasing a lot of bad energy. And again, do have a talk on my podcast, the Robert Utley Show, where we fall into the difference between true masculinity and toxic masculinity.
mm.
If we don't have an embracing society to take boys to men, then yeah, maybe no woman wants a man from that community. But if we live on Trayvon Street, Brother Pratt Street, then
Mm.
we know these boys gonna be all right to choose later in life.
It is interesting because I now, you know, have bear witness to testament of that because some of these boys who's I've had the privilege of being in their lives have now like they're graduating. I'm like, y'all are whole adults. This is crazy. Like I really started to feel where, people when I was growing up, they would say, like I saw you in diapers or, like I'm really feeling that. Like I'm seeing you from boy to man. And if I had a certain interaction, a certain amount of time, or just quality time, uh, with these youth, with these adolescents, with these young boys, a lot of them have steered in the same direction. They don't do the same, they don't live the same, but they're mentally, you know, pretty mentally well balanced. They still, of course, we all people, we all got our stuff, but they're pretty mentally well balanced and pretty self aware. I just talked to one of my young boys. I hope he's watching. My boy Carson. Man, Carson, I love this kid. Love this kid. When was introduced to him, he was in a unstable household, But I truly believe that because of my interjection, his circumstances did not overcome him. He was able to overcome his circumstances. And he reached out to me earlier this week or last week. He told me, look, he said, next Thursday, which is tomorrow, he's walking across the stage. It would be graduating. And I'm like, unbelievable. He sent me some pictures of his prom, and he's like, he's all fresh and stuff, and I was just like, yo, I am blown away. And he told me just a few things that he remembered from him being able to spend time with me. And I'm like, I could tell that those moments are some of the things that you latched onto that kept you and led you from boy to man. I think that it is pivotal, especially in my own experience. If it's not going to come directly from the father, if it's not going to come directly from, the male figure in your household, it still has to come from the men around you. This is why I say you can't have community without communication. I'm serious about that. I'm locked in about that because there are things that I latched onto from men who I deemed were qualified to give me advice from a young age, like barbershop talks and stuff. That I was like, yo, I don't even know if these guys are still alive, right? But some of the things that they said to me just stuck with me, and I was like, you didn't. What really stuck to me is I realized at a young age, never deny or undermine the strength of a child's mind. All of us remember things from childhood, and these things mold our perceptions as we grow into adults. So I remember as a child thinking to myself, like, plenty of guys wanted to tell me something. Most of the ones that wanted to tell me just man up, the regular societal advice, they were dealers. Not that they are discreditable, not the real ones to me anyway. I have my own standards of what is a credible hustler. Um, but they were like derogatory. They were drunkard. They were, using and selling, or, something in that realm disqualified you from being able to guide me as a young boy into manhood. Something about you told me that I don't want to be like that, right? So your advice isn't credible for me. But the ones that I saw, like, oh, you clean, or, like you are qualified, I wouldn't say or run up to because I was a quiet kid. I got that speak when spoken to, don't speak when adults speaking. I got that hard. So I took heed to that. So I was quiet as a kid. I was a mumble speaker and everything. And I'm just thankful that several men in my life saw me and just said something. And a lot of things that they told me did not make sense until I had to experience what they were talking about later on in life.
Mm,
So can't have community without communication. That's one thing I want to say is all of my guys out here, if you've learned something, right? We're talking about a rites of passage that most of us haven't been through. Most of us haven't taught to be a husband. I try to talk to the guys all the time about being faithful. It's easy for us to talk about who we knocked down or that one pretty or, trying to get your body count and, make all these pissing contest comparisons. Like, it's easy to do that. We do that automatically, you know what I'm saying? But when I'm talking about being faithful, that discussion gets quiet or gets shunned away or gets shameful or, you know what I mean? But at the same time, when the group dissipates, all of the guys come to me one on one like, I want what you got. Okay, then maybe we should talk about how to be faithful as a man. You know what I'm saying? Instead of just bragging about the recurring cycles that we all know too well, that didn't come from anyone that loves us. You know what I mean? Like the information, most of the information we got to be a man didn't come from someone who actually cares about us, who actually sees us, who actually, you know, deals with us, who are even in our lives, especially today. Like I said, most advice is coming from a screen, right? So it's coming from someone who doesn't have your best interest at heart. It's coming from someone who this lifestyle may work for them, or at least on the forefront, they making it seem like it works for them. As a creator, as a content creator, you wouldn't believe how many people, because I'm authentic. I give my experiences, my stories, my life, my education. I give me when it comes to my stuff. It's so many people that like when I go like let's have a real conversation, they can't have it. I call them surface dwellers, as y'all know, because I'm like, yo, let's get real about this. Like I was about to put a post out there. We're now, one of my issues is there's no originality. Well, originality doesn't get the popularity. So if you want to trend, if you want to go viral, if you want to be popular on social media, if you want to get the likes up, you want to get the views, then, follow the script, follow the crowd, this trending audio, do what this person did. Or here's just copy, 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 copy. And everybody's doing what everybody's doing. So there's no originality. And I'm like, well,
Hey, brother Pratt,
yeah,
before you get too far from the hood, I just want to go there for a second,
yes,
and that is, if you look at most people who use Section 8 as a generational hand me down, most people
hmm
most people are those their lineage can be traced back to large plantations.
hmm
That is a what we would call a inherited trauma. So, a great professor talks about from the pyramids to the plantations to the projects. These things kind of have a linkage. So sometimes the young man that you was talking about that you show influences to, we first got to understand that that's just not normal.
hmm
For those who can take small bits of information, small bits of contrast to our lives, and make that a focus, you got to understand that that is a superhuman ability, because that's just not the way the brain works. I say
I
that
must be super, bro.
exactly. I say that the mind is a prisoner to the monster of repetition.
Correct.
Typically, that's how we develop by things. That's how your ABCs. Most people can't say their ABCs without getting to the song because that's
Correct.
they learned it. So, shout out to those who are superhuman first and foremost, that are living in certain conditions, but something within your spirit lets you know that you want greater. And you saw something very small that changed your life, and then you tried everything in your ability to obtain that. Again, that is a superhuman quality, right? So
Mm,
now, but for those that are trying to, as you were describing the guys that when they talk to you, they want to be faithful, but they're gonna leave your presence and go back to that lifestyle that they're accustomed to.
mm,
These are the people that may not be as super, because you saw somebody do it, therefore it should be able to be replicated. It should be able to easily duplicate. But for some reason, you're dealing with a little bit more trauma, and it's not as easy as for you to let that go. Uh, but those things are, it has to be in a safe environment. I'm glad that you make yourself available to have those conversations, because that's where make and break moments happen, when you have an opportunity to sit down with a mentor, sit down with someone that you admire. And so sometimes those things are, you know tasks got to be created, activities got to be created, mental choices on what you actually, how you feel about yourself. Because again, men are going, like, I think women are doing this too, but we focus on the men for, June, men's mental health. We do want that balance. And I love that little verse from Little Wayne when he says, after he busts, he then comes back to his sense. So at some point in time, you're going to come across the right decision, whether it's in the intent setting up, shorty, or, you know what I mean, the act itself, or the morning after. At some point in time, the right decision is going to hit you.
Mhm.
I know they want to talk to you. They know they want to be faithful, but at the same time, uh, there's some triggers that have to be addressed. There's some behaviors that have to be modified. But ultimately, of course, no human being on earth really ultimately innately want to make the wrong decision all the time.
Correct.
They want to be righteous. They want to be right. So it's just a process. It just takes a little bit more extra steps for others, but of course, any and all can be accomplished.
Mm, I like how you put that. I got a question. I got like three more questions,
Okay.
maybe more, but we'll see how it goes. What I want to know, and I feel like this is like a simple question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway, is how can a rites of passage help men break generational cycles of trauma or dysfunction?
You know, this probably got to be maybe tested a little bit further, but I'm still to the understanding that my statement earlier is that it's not as important to be human, or being human is not that important. What is important is that we were divinely blessed to have a conscience.
Mm,
So a lot of times with my classes, it's not about trying to teach you what it is to be conscious for you. It's first of all trying to teach you that you have a conscience.
mm,
You have a self modifier within yourself. You have it within yourself to correct your behaviors, to think a different way. Uh,
mm,
that part has to probably be embraced a little bit more within yourself. So um, ultimately, the answer to that question is, everyone is blessed with this gift to undo any and everything. How we was talking earlier about, to become the man, you had to beat the man. And then you start talking about, your contributions to young guys, and but that comes from not by example, but you know what I mean. But internally, it's something saying, "Hey, I know how it made me feel. I want these guys to walk around hurt like I was hurt when I was coming up." So ideally, that's a sincere, conscious decision. You're not repeating.
Message.
You're not repeating hurt. You know what I mean? You made it into a purpose. You made it into a life goal. Matter of fact, you made it into a business. Shout out, is improving the mind. You can always improve. It's in you. Every creation was given a way of correcting itself. That's why when you get a cut, on that seventh level, the melanocytes, it sends up melanin, to get a clot. Like, your body knows how to repair itself. And given the right nutrients, you can actually heal yourself. And I don't want to get into that. That's uh, big market, and I don't want to go there. But innately, you have everything within yourself from Jump Street. Going back to that seed. There's nothing that could prevent you from living out your purpose. There's nothing that can alter you. Like I said, a avocado seed is going to bloom an avocado, and an orange seed is going to bloom an orange. You should be able to easily bloom,
Mm.
but you have to take that initial steps to know thyself, and that is innately listening to that inner voice a little bit more, having conversations with that inner voice a little bit more. Trust me, it's not going to put you in the wrong direction.
Message.
Because every time I listen to that gut feeling, that inner intuition, spirit speaks, every time I listen, I be like, you won't wrong. You feel me? You won't wrong. My inner conflicts come from now. Some of my inner conflicts, my strongest ones, my strongest inner battles is not wanting, sometimes I could be overly optimistic, not wanting what I was just shown, the reality, because we got this dual reality my brother Keith spoke on. I don't want this physical reality with my mental, my spiritual reality to be different. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, this person just showing me their true colors, but I also see their potential. My conflict is I want to lean on their potential, but I know if I do that, I'll be setting myself up for failure because they're consistently their physical reality is consistent. So I can't just go off of what I see or what I project on to the next person. And that's a lot of the times my inner conflict is like, right from wrong. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want it to be that.
Come to your senses in the morning. I get you. I get
Yeah. Right. So, I think I kind of asked this already, but I'll ask, how can young men navigate the confusion around modern masculinity and societal expectations? And for everybody that's listening, link is in the description for the episode of the difference between true masculinity and toxic masculinity. For the Robert Utley show, the True podcast, the Robert Utley show, that's the TRU. The link is available in the description. It's free. It's on Spotify. Check that out if you want to hear more on this. But I ask you, Mr. Utley, how can young men navigate the confusion around modern masculinity and societal expectations?
you. I love a phrase when I say being born into a lie means you're living a lie.
Mm,
So sometimes we got to ask the question why a little bit more. So when society is pushing a plate in front of you, do you
mm,
al- do you always have to eat from that plate?
mm,
Should you have a question of what it is that you're about to intake? Everything you bring into a body, your body becomes a part of you. So let's have a look at what society is saying a man is. So some
mm.
are deeper questions to maybe get into with me, the way I think and the way I move, because I like to look at the structure of things first and foremost.
Mhm.
Because as you know, when you build in a house, that foundation has to be strong.
Mm,
That framework has to be done correctly. And then all the little cosmetics later on, sometimes we leave that up to our well organized ladies. But again, that foundation has to be solid. So if society's norms are saying this about manhood, but let's compare it to other cultures,
mm,
other moments in time, and if it
mm.
doesn't stand the test of true strong men, then question the society norms. That's and to me, that's perfectly fine
Correct.
because as we know, a lot of times during some of these institutions out there, and I got nothing against our educational system, but most times we learn what to think and not how to think.
Correct. Correct.
So when you're not going through the process of how does this make sense to me? Does this make sense to me? Because sometimes I tell my kids this. Sometimes passing the test means you failed, and some
Correct.
failing the test you actually pass because it's all based on whoever wrote the test.
Mm,
And if the designer of the test made an error, then by you regurgitating, a response that they have generated, you got to understand that is incorrect.
mm.
So, but to specifically ask that question, I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's just like, hey guys, when people are telling you this is what it means to be a man, do your own research, have a curiosity.
Right.
And if you do not see that that is what you want to become, if that's not how you design your purpose on becoming a man, then you have the right to to stand on top, on stand on 10, stand on your own truth,
Stand on business.
stand on business, as brother Pratt. So that's where this conversation kind of leads, and so I just like, so hey guys, that's what I was saying. Some of these things are toxic masculinity, which is men are the head, women are to
Mm,
be submissive.
mm.
You know what I mean? So to me, right off the bat, listen to that as a man, I already know that ain't gonna fly for me. The households I've been in, like, nah, that ain't necessarily the case with these strong, especially these strong black women. Like, uh,
Right.
more than likely, what is more successful, and you talk about this quite often, and I agree with it, 100%, is a partner.
Come on now.
That's what should be taking place for the most part in these households. So, men, don't be looking for a servant, be looking for a strong partner because
Mm.
trust, that partner is a partner to me, and by definition, has an investment. So, when a partner feels like they have something invested and y'all are 50-50, y'all are dividing the dividends, you're dividing the profits, you're dividing the intake, of that, then she's going to fight for it just as much as you're going to fight for it because I got something to lose in this because I'm a full-pledged partner. So again, so that is just an example of what I think brings forth some toxicity and masculinity.
Mm.
Message.
I we had a society at one time where it was normal that the woman was the homebody, and whatever I bring to the table, I bring to the table as is. So, but that was just for a moment in time. What about the societies where prior to that, where you talk about hunter gatherers?
Correct.
In that scenario, the women actually brought more to the table than the men.
Correct.
So what about that? I mean, are we considering that into the equation? Talking about masculinity, are we looking at other cultures, other points, in time in history where the definitions of maybe manhood and womanhood and family were a little bit different than the way it is today? So again, I'm not questioning Western society, Western thought, Western philosophy. I'm just saying you got to make that decision for yourself.
Correct.
You got to examine that and then compare which the society. I'm not going to. I have the answer, but I'm not going to give you the answer. But some societies have actually brought forth strong men.
Mm.
Others have weakened men. And if I can speak on the ones that if I think about, the matrilineal really made strong men. Nothing against the patrilineal. We're kind of in a patriarch, but the matrilineal actually was a society, a point in time where men were actually, just in my just the research where they was just more in tune with respecting the female, understanding what she brings to the table, understanding how she fulfills, how she completes me, versus the changeover where actually she brings nothing to the table. Is all on me. I'm the head. I'm the leader. What I say goes. To me, that just created a society that created more strife. That's why women in the '60s had to march, fight for women's rights. Um, so again, now are we still basing what true masculinity is based on today's standards, or a time where there was more balance between masculinity and femininity? Because we know both of those energies are what creates. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I guess that's how I would answer the question. I hope I answered the question.
The question was, how can young men navigate the confusion around modern masculinity and societal expectations? I think you answered that by doing research. Have a little curiosity, a lot of curiosity, because when I can speak for myself, when I just tried to be what the outside world was telling me what a man is, that's when I was in my rebellious phase. So for me, I was getting messages of stop smiling, don't be laughing so much, ain't nothing funny. You don't smile in pictures, you don't show emotions, you don't, you know what I mean? Like all of these things was like, okay, I got everything that I'm hearing, be different, be different, be different, be different. And what those differences did was cause my inner conflict, because the people that then accepted me as a man weren't my people, for one thing. For another thing, what you accepted of me was an image that I was putting on for you. So you accepted what I look like with the mask on, but I can't keep this mask on forever. I'm going to be me. You know what I mean? Like I got, uh, you got to do something with your hands, which I agree. Don't play the game, video games, make you weak and all of that stuff. Um, Drawing is for sissies and all of that stuff. Meanwhile, I love art. I love video games. I love laughing. I love smiling. I'm more emotionally aware, so I'm not super emotionally reactive. But as far as emotion, I'm showing happy. I'm showing, like general interest in others and what is going on around me and things of that nature. And it's like, it's confusing you because your download, you on this program, or these other guys got the same programming of what it is to be a man. So, business that I'm going against the program, I'm not fitting in. But then I get the different responses. And after I started getting the different responses, more women accepting me for who I was, women using me. I got used as the example for so many people. I've lost friendships because they like, you need to be more like Trey. What does that mean? She knows what that means, but you can't see it because it's outside of your programming, So, like, and I'm like, I would love to talk to you, but I know that just caused a whole rift. If your woman say you need to be more like him, well, go get him then. No, that's not what she getting at, my dude. But it wasn't until I accepted myself that I didn't have to try to be. I could just be. And I believe, because there is no specific type of man, right? I believe that you, as a man, being yourself will place you in that category of being a man first. right? And then all the other stuff is mechanics. We can work this stuff out, like you can build your physical attributes. You can gain, sense of emotion and introspective. You know what I'm saying? You can work on so many different areas, but first you got to accept yourself for who you are. You can't even improve. We always improving. You can't improve on what you're not aware of, not intentionally. You know what I'm saying? You might, on a happy accident, big up yourself on something. You might stumble into a win here and there. But if we talk about always improving, then you can't improve what you're not paying attention to. So first, accept yourself, be aware of yourself, and then you acknowledge what you want to improve on. And notice that we say improve, not change. A lot of guys I know say that they want to change themselves. And I'm like, what about you that you're trying to change? You should be loving you. Like, you are the way you are for a reason. You know what I mean? Now, of course, there are the areas that you should want to improve. You want to improve, cool. You can do that. You should want to do that for you. As a result, as a result, you improving yourself would improve the people around you, the people that you interact with, and so forth. But you should want to improve you for you, whatever that looks like. But you shouldn't want to like change you, like get rid of you and recreate a whole new you. Like, I don't. That's
Well,
cringe to me.
that was going viral not too long ago, and it still may be a trendy thing when people are talking about doing shadow work.
Mm,
That's the part of us that, again, people are trying to get rid of, or trying to change, or trying to get a better, build a better handle on. But
mm-hmm,
I think about things because, again, in universal laws, that also comes into the conversation about the law of polarity:
mm-hmm,
North Pole to South Pole, East to West, sunrise to sunset. Like from the movie Vampire in Brooklyn, every day can't be a sunny day. If it is, then what is a sunny day, right? So,
mm-hmm,
uh, and sometimes I even refer to like the cartoon Peter Pan. Like, he thought he wanted to get rid of his shadow, but in the beginning of the movie, he's chasing his shadow down to reattach the shadow to himself.
mm,
He got, he felt, not whole. So a lot of people who's trying to get rid of or trying to change something about themselves, understanding you actually taken away, which most of the time is a critical part of you.
mm.
Because that whole concept of, because like back in the 1500s, old English, the word nice was not the way we use the word nice today. Nice back in old English meant foolish,
Woo. Still to this day.
naive. And and one way we still use that term today without really understanding it is we'll say things like, "Oh, you too nice,"
mm,
because if that would have been me, I'll let you finish that sentence because we probably have all said it before once or twice in our lifetime. But that brings back its old meaning, nice meaning, naive. So sometimes that dark shadow, that powerful force, where we go to Star Wars, the force, the dark side, right? Uh, Sometimes that force may be needed to get certain people out of your life.
woo, woo. Preach.
That may be the conversation where you got to have with your supervisor when you're telling him today is my last day.
Mm,
So sometimes that shadow, you're gonna be like Peter Pan, you're gonna be chasing it down because at one point in time, that shadow is a powerful force. Because I like to break down the universe. Like, over 95% of the universe is dark matter.
correct. Woo.
Then 4% of that is dark energy. There's only a small percentage which is actual physical light. The strongest force in the universe is dark energy, dark matter, right? So I like to say, hang on to that shadow a little bit longer, but understand its creative force, its destructive powers. And destruction is not always a bad thing because sometimes, in order for you to build your dream house, you got to tear down that raggedy trailer first.
Hello. I love that expression because I use the workout metaphor to build any new muscle built. You have to tear and shred the old muscle. That's that burn that you get.
Oh
Feel
yes.
the burn, that tension. That tension is that muscle now stretching, and it had to burst and tear. That new muscle had to burst and tear out of the old muscle. You know what I mean? So when I think of improving, that's what I think about. That's the route that I go into.
And
Is
we could even use like everything in nature is a great teacher, right?
hell yeah,
Uh,
yes,
so when you look at like lobsters, right, you got to
mm,
understand as they are growing, they first got to crack out that old shell.
hmm,
So they'll go hide, tuck away under a rock at the bottom so they can be safe in a sense of breaking through that shell. And a lot of times there's a new TV show out there called Serpent, but a lot of times, a lot of sacred symbols was the snake back in the day because snakes, presented a regeneration when they shed off that old skin so new skin can, burst forth.
hmm,
So I hear what you're saying. So absolutely, like improving or growing. Even think about the plant busting through that nutshell in the beginning. You know what I mean? And then when it's out of its shell, it's under earth. So now it's still got to crawl through the earth
yep,
before it can go above ground and actually now feel the warmer embrace of the sun. So
hmm,
all improving, all growing is a process. Sometimes it doesn't feel good, but and sometimes maybe that's what we're going through as men. Sticking with what's comfortable.
mm,
So
mm,
again, so sometimes we just gotta get through that. Hey, I gotta push through this comfort zone a little bit in order for things to change. In order for me to improve, I gotta go
yeah.
through a transition.
I gotta step up. You know what I'm saying? I gotta step up. I gotta go through it. Um, and that seed, that seed anecdote is also a reference to most of the time that seed, all of its development was in the dark of the soil. You know, all of that, what had to happen, nutrients, development, growth, happened in the dark.
And,
So I don't run away from the shadow world either.
and look, and I always gotta remind people that God once said, "Let there be light."
Correct.
So that means God was where first?
It was pretty dark out here, you know what I'm saying? But that's what I love about it. I also, what I wanted to say, had a brain fight. We was talking about the dark. Oh yeah, uh, true acceptance of self. What I was speaking on is being able to acknowledge, right? Because for me, I tell you one of my things that can be considered a flaw. I'm very confrontational. So there was a year where I wanted to get that under control, right? And what happened is I went from being confrontational to being passive. So now the very people who knew not to approach me a certain way was just stepping all over me. What is happening? I said, you know what?
You
I
being
had to learn. I'm being nice. I am being nice. I said, people only value you as much as you value yourself. And if you only want to focus on the good things about you or what's considered the good things, because you've placed these qualities into, categories, what's good about you, what somebody else sees as a flaw could be your best trait. Me being confrontational also led to me being honest, right? I'm willing to speak. Hmm? I'm willing to say what is, might bring out the elephant in the room, but what is deemed necessary to be said, right? And with that, I've had way more conversations, which has built my conversing skills. And that has led to me being able to handle business, right? I no longer have to, if I'm hiding myself, if I'm only trying to show a portion of me, right? Then to have a partner takes transparency. To be transparent, you have to be willing to be vulnerable. That's another discussion. But if we talk in relationship, it was some arguments was there because again, you're not showing your full intention. Speaking for myself, I'm just trying to be good, which has led me to just trying to be nice, which means that you can only see what I'm giving you. Versus when I finally spoke up, it's like when I finally spoke up, I remember this because there's a lot of learning, you know what I'm saying, throughout my life. When I finally spoke up and put my foot down on something metaphorically, that's when like my woman would be like, finally, like you was testing me. Like if I can't tell you no, how can you trust me to tell somebody else no? If I can't stand my ground against you, how can you trust me to stand our ground against an opposing threat? If you know what I'm saying, like if if I'm not accepting of myself in all areas, right? Then I don't know who I am. I don't know how to show up. I don't know what to do, how to navigate. I don't know what's true or false to me. I don't have a leg to stand on. We talk about standing on business. I don't have a leg to stand on if I don't know who I am. And a lot of us know, but we're ashamed or been programmed to be ashamed of certain aspects of us. I would tell the guys, any man that's listening, any young man that's listening, any boy that's listening, I would tell you to accept yourself, learn yourself, be aware of yourself, and know what part of yourself, like learn what part of yourself is needed for whatever the situation may cause.
So now
Right?
I want to say this here. So first and foremost, what I'm hearing from you is you just being truthful. So now I like to first say that for those who know me, that we had this conversation many times, and I don't want it's for a longer conversation,
Yeah.
but I must say it is first and foremost, like, I do not believe in anything.
Hmm. Yeah, that's for a longer conversation.
I know what I know, and when I don't know something, I research to know it. Right. So, but it's again, it's a longer conversation, but it's an introduction to what I need to say here, and the thing with being truth and confrontational. It's just that the truth. This is an old proverb. The truth is like a lion.
Mhm.
You don't have to protect the lion. You don't have to fight for it. You know what I mean? The truth will be able to stand on its own, defend itself.
Mm.
So just let the lion loose. Shout out to Big Leos, right? Um, so now, so again, so the truth sometimes seems very confrontational.
Mm.
I love that you've been making recommendations of one of the greatest artists I think ever existed, Prince, the song Controversy. But just telling how you feel or speaking a truth is not me being confrontational just to be confrontational. It may seem like a controversy or it may seem controversial, but you're just having issues with the truth, not really with me.
Hmm.
And it goes back to, ancestor John Henry Clark, where he talks about a little bit, he says that, you know, I don't I only debate my equals. All others I teach.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I got no time. I'm just really what he was doing in that conversation, in that debate. He was just saying, I'm just going to spit truth.
Yeah.
And y'all going to have to take your time and process it and research it and come to an understanding of what I'm saying. But I'm not going to go back and forth with you over a truth.
Right.
And many
Right.
times, so many examples. And that's why, again, when I was talking about Eastern philosophy versus Western society, Western philosophy, have the opportunity to research another culture, research other traditions, see what they define as men. How did they teach their men? How did they bring their boys from boyhood to manhood?
Mm.
And if you see something that's, relevant to you, then you have a new, a new something to stand upon. You have something else now to. It's like, you know what? I see myself in a better light, because you got to understand too. Like, there are multi cultures.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about society, understand that, question that. Whose society is this? Who benefits from
Yes.
society? And if in education, who is this education for?
Mm.
If you don't talk about me, or talk about people that look like me, or people that think and move like me, then am I learning anything for real, for real?
Mm.
And not, I'm supposed to be learning anything from you. Education, again, is bringing what's within, without. Is this a fostering environment to me become the better me?
Right.
Are these my true teachers? If you at the age of 9, 7 through 9 becomes the age of reasoning, and you asking more specific questions than just why when you from 0 to 7.
Hmm.
Why is the sky green? Why is this? You know what I mean? When you asking reasonable questions about how do I fit into this whole scenario, because it's weird that we teach that in business school, the whole
Hmm.
with them, what's in it for me.
Yeah.
Why is that not taught in middle school or fourth grade? What is it? What's in it for me? I appreciate you talking about people like Columbus and George Washington, but as you said in the introduction about knowing the actual names of those who came before slavery, and we even
Yes.
great heroes throughout slavery. I don't want to shun on them. Great
Right.
examples, but yeah, like, why don't I know about Princess Yananga? Queen Nzinga.
Mm.
A true understanding of Dessalines, Emperor Dessalines of the Haiti Revolution. Like, why are we not talking about these people that stood for justice? And that justice freed nations, freed people. So if we're talking social studies and equality, why don't this name come up?
Mm.
Because I know a lot of young men, especially those who look like I and you, could relate to that. And it's not about just particularly that, but again, it's just education. Again, for those that are learning or supposed to be learning anything, is really how to become a better them. And if I can share, one thing about teaching in my capacity is always storytelling. So I always got a story to tell.
Okay.
Uh, is a story of Tahuti talking to a real live person in history, Queen Hatshepsut, the pharaoh. But
All
she's
right.
talking to Tahuti, and Tahuti is saying, the light. Once we turn on the light, we can see everything in the room.
Mm.
Unfortunately, 500 years ago, someone turned out the light.
Mm.
So Queen Hatshepsut then asks, what is the light, teacher? Tahuti said that it's not about what is the light or who is the light. Light is the process of becoming. And she later asked Queen Hatshepsut, then how do we turn this light on? And he responded by Tahuti responds by saying, someone has to hit the switch. Understanding that the light, the switch is the thought. That's your thoughts. Somebody has to turn on your thinking, your thoughts. This whole conversation has been about, improving young men, going from boy to man. Someone has to turn on the switch within yourself. Someone has to turn on the light, because once the light is on, we know this metaphysically, because once the light on, we can see everything in the room. But what can we see? How can we move effectively in a dark room? So we got to turn on this. We got to hit this switch, because someone has made it where what to think. That's, to me, is that dark room. They're telling you what to think. You're losing the processes of the light. Is a process of becoming. You're learning your environment. You're learning where everything is at. You're learning how the world moves. You're learning how you are yourself within this environment. So you actually have to turn on your thoughts, hit that switch, and go through that light process, which is again the process of becoming. So I just thought that that story was also just a cool example on, again, it's just putting the responsibility back onto us. I mean, we can never get away from that.
It's on us to bring this balance.
Manhood, again, is about balancing matter, the masculinity, and energy, femininity. Again, if you're going to be the leader of anything, especially if you want to be the leader of a group that includes women, or be a president where you have women citizens. If you're going to be a leader, a man in any capacity, understanding that first and foremost, you are to be a balancer. It's a balancing. I
Yeah.
love you. Yeah.
Hey, I got one more question before we head out. And first and foremost, I want to thank you for your time. And I thank everybody that has been here with us the whole time. Love y'all. Appreciate y'all. Last question before we wrap this up. If someone watching wants to create a rites of passage for themselves or for their sons, what have you, where should they begin?
I would say the first thought you want to have is you want yourself, as well as the young boy or young girl. I mean, rites of passage can go for girl to womanhood, like boy to manhood. Uh,
Mm,
is let's try to be first in a thought process of being autonomous. That is meaning that you are control of all of the resources necessary for you to become whatever the end goal is. Make sure first and foremost you have all of the resources needed to complete this complete rites of passage. Good examples, like I said, if there's not a man or a father figure in the household, then there needs to be a list of positive male role models in the neighborhood that could be added into this this collection of resources. My son ain't gonna be able to become a man until he beat a man. Who's a good man out there that will be willing for him to be challenged by my son?
mhm,
So once you
mhm,
have all of the resources to be autonomous in this process, then there has to be individually intent challenges to take your child throughout each phase. When a child is in the beginning phase, they always ask them why. Now, that why is a spirit.
mhm,
Do not discourage that spirit by saying, because I said so, or, stop asking so many questions. That's a spirit that a child has. And once that why spirit has got enough answers, that spirit disappears.
mhm,
But if you got a 14-year-old still asking why, if you got a 21-year-old man still asking why me, why this keep happening, that child has not been, or that man has not been officially brought through the rites of passage.
mhm,
So 0 to 7, these are the earlier years of grooming. And then when you get into the pure stage, um, again, these are intentional challenges that, how do I get my child, first and foremost, stop asking why all the time? The next phase for teenagers, like, okay, now this child, again, like you talk about the teenage, these rebel years, because these rebel years are a result because, again, the world around me does not fit the world that's inside of myself. What you saying doesn't, that's why sometimes they say parents don't, children don't listen to their parents. What you saying is not relevant to the reality that I exist in.
Right.
So you got to know your child well enough to know what challenges they are internally facing.
Mm.
And then you got to put them in situations where they overcome these challenges all on their own. Because, I don't want to go too far, but, it's a good example to study the life of Shaka Zulu because Shaka, his mother Nandi, actually had to leave because of all of the strife amongst the other women in the village. So Shaka did not grow up with his biological father. So, but at the age 14, when Nandi brought Shaka back to the community, um, he had to go through a rites of passage. So he had to actually go to the hunting grounds. Now they say it takes 3 days to walk to these hunting grounds. Shaka returned in 6 days, meaning he went there 3 days, did what he was supposed to do, and walked back with the head of a lion. So he killed the lion and brought it back, on day one when he first got there.
Mm.
So even he had to do something, and we see that in the movie. It's kind of comical, but that kind of happened in what Coming to America Part Two.
Mm.
When he brought his son to Africa, he had to hunt down the lion and pull the whiskers off of a lion. So again, we can make modern day challenges based on our environment. So whatever's in the environment that may be holding your child back from being comfortable stepping out into their environment, then you know that that's a challenge that your child has to overcome. If your child is having problems going outside to play with other children, social anxieties, then a rite of passage is, you can't come back in this house until you make a friend. Though some challenges like that where once they accomplish it themselves, then they are then become into the habit. And that's what the rites of passage is all about, is every time you come into a challenge, each one of these phases during your life, from child to teen to adult to elder to ancestor, you know if you're not held responsible for your own anxieties and not placed in a situation where you are in a position where no, you have to accomplish that, you have to overcome that,
Mm.
then this is how we can make a modern day rites of passage. Now, I also have an online course that's coming available pretty soon where we actually talk about I got an example of modern day rites of passage. But again, these are things that, if you don't come and do the online course or see one example, but again, I encourage everyone to check it out. Again, those are like, the steps, understanding the child's physical as well as emotional state to the point where you create a safe environment for them to partake in a sacred ritual, a righteous rival, and
Mm.
as they overcome these are also the rites of passage that help people understand, hey, I was feeling a certain way, my emotional state wasn't good, I was anxious. Some people don't like to say the word scared. Some people say, oh, I'm not scared, I'm anxious. Whatever you want to call that feeling of uncomfort, um, it'd be great as a parent, as a guardian, to make sure that they do not run away from it. That fear, that emotion that you're going through is something that you have to address. And again, from boyhood to manhood, you have to master your emotions.
Whoop. Hold on, hold on. Very well put. I'm thinking about, the main I would consider rites of passage where it's obvious and like the group would challenge you is like going to talk to a girl. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's the main one that comes to mind for me for the guys is I remember, and I don't know if we have this anymore. I don't know if the youth have this in them, or I know that they've been getting away from like using social media as a scapegoat instead of actually approaching the female. Um, but I remember, we used to three or four of us in a group, we go meet up or drive out to the mall or even just like in school in passing or something, you know what I'm saying? Hey, if you want to get back in this car, whoever was driving, in order to get back in this car, you gotta
You
have
got
a
number.
number. You gotta get a number, bro.
Yes,
Gotta get
indeed.
a number. That was pressure. I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know. And then it's like, well, it is a lot of, you know, I want to say women because I'm a man, but a teenager. There's a lot of other teenage, females that are in my presence. I can talk to some of them. You know what I'm saying? And sure enough, like I went through that rites of passage. So then confidence skyrocketed, whether successful or not, confidence skyrocketed in my capability of just being able to talk to a woman. You know what I mean? And a lot of the youth don't even have that. So that's what I think of automatically when it comes to rites of passage. You know what I mean? For a man. What other things, like oh, you finally got a bully, it's time to go back out there. Most of the time, the older sibling or big brother character, either you fight them or you fight me. Like, I don't want to fight either one, but if I had to choose, I already know you can beat me. Let me go and try my hands with this one. Want to fight everybody.
So now you gave two good examples because one of those is going to require you to overcome the matter, the physical.
Hmm.
That's standing up to a bully. The other one you said earlier was again like atom, the balance of matter and energy. The other one was overcoming energy. So as you
Oh,
got
yeah.
hard to approach the female for that number, you already know it's going to be, let me let me make sure my clothes straight. Let's make sure I'm smelling nice. I got to do the breath check. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things, that the mood got to be right. And if
Mm,
the mood ain't right, it's just not going to happen. So that's making sure that the energy around you is all positive or at least attractive. So therefore, the woman's going to feel your energy a lot more than she's going to be really that much into the physical. Yeah, there
mm,
are, but a lot of times, women more likely, he made me smile, he made me laugh. You know what I mean? Make her feel like she's, like you said, make sure she's the only girl in the room, or make sure she feels as if that in her presence she's going to feel comfortable and safe to be herself. So a lot of times that's where that comes from. So yeah, there are many examples like that. I don't want to say a lot of times the rites of passage for boyhood to manhood should always just focus on the physical.
right.
How you were saying some negatives out there is like, don't cry, toughen up, you know what I mean? So I would never necessarily say that all the things that society has said that represent what it is to be a man are absolutely the only ways. And that's why I didn't want to give those specific examples because, every child is different.
Correct.
Like my brother was very outgoing. So, but so therefore he could not stand to be around himself.
Mm,
Whereas I was more of an introvert And I had to get more comfortable in being in, you know, things like this, public engagements, speaking engagements. Oh my goodness, like me doing that, really? So my rites of passage would not be, like, man, know thyself. I knew myself pretty well at an early age because, again, me being an introvert and always having these whys and having great parents where a lot of my whys were answered, not no sit down, do what I say, more engaging conversations. Um, so that allowed me to, um, really focus on external. Because again, like one thing I remember speaking at my father and mother's anniversary, one of them where I stood up and said, I had never seen my parents argue.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was in a relationship. I didn't even know how to argue right, because I had no examples on how to do that. So again, like I said, the rites of passage, I just want to make sure that when we talk about boyhood and manhood, it's not all about accomplishing these what we consider manly or physical challenges.
Right.
Uh, and even if it does require a physical challenge, let's take the time to ask them, like, how did they feel as they went through that physical challenge?
What did you learn? You
What
know.
did you and I really want to focus on the emotional state, type of questions when they do a physical challenge, because again, we want that balance.
Right.
Did that Doing that challenge, did that make you feel more like a man? Sometimes that could be a specific question to ask,
Mm,
and sometimes they may say yes, sometimes they may say no, and if it says no, then that lets you know then, you know what was the emotional lesson to be learned in that challenge. And it always drill again. I can't say it no more. What I mean, I can't speak on it more. And when I just say again, it's a balancing act. We want all of our men to be balanced. No more narcissistic bullies. You know what I mean? Where that conquest mentality. Because even sometimes they didn't transfer that conquest mentality even into relationships.
mm-hmm.
When you talk to guys that are just out there, just you know put numbers on the board. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we want to make sure that again with that balance, because even when I think about that for a scenario, like even like talking about other cultures, when you come down to polygamy,
Mm-hmm.
so in doing polygamy the right way, if wife A gets a Mercedes Benz, then guess what kind of car wife B gets?
I'm gonna say it's been.
You know what I mean? So even therefore, it's about, like, you don't want no turmoil, so you can't show one more than the next. So it's just like, so even doing that correctly is a sincere balance. So yeah, I would say that, if you was looking for a specific task for like an introvert that may be into games, you may have to sit down with your son, or you may have to sit down with, as a guardian with another young man, and get into their reality,
Yeah.
um, and watch them build confidence by again overcoming challenges. It may take them a while to beat you in Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, but when it happens, that's an achievement. It
Mm-hmm.
may but again, they're looking at you because the first thing a child relates to God is is the adult that's responsible for their upbringing. So
That's right.
if you want to know how a child feels about God, then understand your relationship with that child.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
If that child doesn't respect you, they can have problems with their spiritual life down the line
Mm.
because God has already disappointed them. They looked up to you for the answers. And our shortcomings actually puts us in a position of hurting them emotionally. That's another built trauma that they're going to experience later in life. So that's why it's just it's a I like to talk the story about in one particular tribe in Africa, when a mother is pregnant, the mother makes up a song specifically for that child.
Mm.
When that child is born, the mother already taught the other mothers and fathers in the community that song. So
Yep.
whenever that child went to a graduation or achieved something, they celebrated that child with that song. On their wedding day, they're playing the bride song and the groom song. That's going to be the first songs we dance to. These songs stay with them their entire lives. And I say that to say that this bringing boys to men,
Mm.
it's an ongoing process. I can't say, when it's going to be over for a particular person when they actually then become a man. If
Right.
there's a number of challenges that are going to determine, hey, you don't do these 10 challenges, therefore you should be a man. Nah, it's an engaging process. And like you said, the way that you know that it's working is communication. There's no point of disconnecting communication on, you know, understanding, if this person has learned the lesson, if this person is finally complete. No, you got to have that conversation. How was your day? Why did you do that? How did that make you feel? That communication allows a man to remain a man. That's a point. Sometimes a man can become a man, but they can't stay a man because the communication has been broken.
Mm.
There's no new challenges. There's no confirmations. There's no balancing. So then, therefore, I can get lost in myself,
Mm.
and sometimes I took a few steps back. You know what I mean? That's why
Right.
say, hey, sometimes things get away from you, go back to basics. So
Yep.
sometimes if you're not continually improving or continually growing, sometimes you're taking steps back.
Correct. Correct.
And you got to go back and then sometimes do task over again.
Hmm. I want to highlight this comment from Quanton. Said, "We got to teach our young men that a fight is not to death. That confrontation does not mean eternal hate. Love and respect exist after competitive sport." You know what I'm saying?
We kind of talk about it all the time, right? So like, sometimes a butt whooping is just needed.
It's just needed. I had to put these hands on you real quick, and after
You
that,
know what
you
I mean?
ready to talk?
And then after that, I'm gonna help you back up because it's no love lost.
Correct.
And and I don't know if you can attest to this, but I know I can. Shout out to my boy Kent if he's watching. But Kent was my childhood bully.
Say word.
But then when I stood up and did what I needed to do, best friends for life.
Right.
What was needed to get done got done, but it was no love lost. Actually, love was built from that. Uh, We know it's great to have fighters in our corner. See, like for me, I would consider
Right.
myself I would consider myself from the education clan, but our tribe still needs the warrior clan.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, violence to me is a physical altercation with the intent of almost mental or genocidal, and that doesn't mean death every time. It's like you're taking somebody off of their course. That's what genocide really means. When you genocide a people, a group of people were headed in a certain direction, and their path got altered.
Mm.
Right. So, if somebody needs to have some hands laid on them, not religiously, then sometimes they are on a course of destruction. They are on a the wrong path. Because if somebody else outside of me put hands on you, you could probably lose your life. I'm not going to take your life, but I'm gonna make sure you understand you don't want these hands. You may not be built for the ring. You know what I mean? And that's why
Right.
sometimes even look, this is like prison talk. Sometimes when people go to prison, they can tell who's the smart guy right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Like this guy got a wrong deal, but he doesn't belong here. So sometimes that person get left alone.
Mm.
But if you go on cell block A and let's say talking like you the man, oh, hands gonna get put on you. You are looking for a challenge, and they're gonna make sure the right guy on the block approaches you and make sure you learn that lesson. So you know we also have a responsibility as powerful men. Our warrior clan, blessings to all you big brothers, is yeah, when you are seeing people, you know what I mean, outside of what their purpose is, you know what I mean? Sometimes you got to just put them back in their place. But of course, I don't condone any violence, you know what I mean? But these are lessons learned to, again, just direct, clear paths, direct course. I would say they're more utilized in that way.
Mm-hmm. I definitely, I might be in that warrior clan, but I tell you, like I tell many of people, most of the best friends are the ones that I went toe to toe with.
Yeah.
And it's like that bond that's built. Like I applaud the movie Friday, the classic Friday, when Pop said, yeah, you know what I mean? Pop said, you live to fight another day. Like, I don't think that message is getting across in today's society, and we can go another 30 minutes on that. But that's what I was brought up on. There's still respect, there's still love. Like, now it's all about dominance and being the victor. You can't take a L. You can't be ashamed. See, if me, whoever I fight, if we fight, if I get the best of you, then I just got the best of you. Like you said, I'm gonna help you. If I knocked you down, I'm gonna help you up. But and that act alone is gonna show like, no, there's love. I still care for you. I, I don't want you to lose your life. I didn't even want to hurt you. I didn't want this to get to this point. But if it needed to be because you such a knucklehead, that knuckle needed to be attached to this head real quick. You know what I'm saying? In order for me to get through to you. Because what you're doing, how you're acting, is going to lead to way more detriment later down the road.
Have you
So,
have you seen the special by the comedian Ali Sadiq?
which one?
Uh,
I've been watching Ali Sadiq like religiously, bro. I've been weak off Ali, bro.
he got the new one talking about two sons.
Yes, yes.
Where he had to take his son to the ring.
Hey, dude. And what's funny is his son named Trey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Say, hey, did he change my clothes? He said, I got on the same clothes from home. He got into boxing gear and all that. What he don't know, I've been boxing since I was 6 years old.
But hey, but when he knocked his son down, he still gave him some encouraging words afterwards. Like again, it wasn't done out of hate. Again, that's a difference between abuse and discipline. That was a discipline. It wasn't abusive. You know what I mean? So okay, you need to be put on a corrective path of you need to be on a path of correction. We need to change your discourse. You need to change your maybe disillusions you have about yourself, because you told me you don't want these hands, but in actuality you don't want hands. uh and I'm trying to tell you, you're not a boxer, son, because that was really, he was dealing with an illusion that he was a boxer, and he kept trying to tell his son, that's just not that's just not you're not a boxer. But some lessons have to be learned and taught in a different way, a different format. And again, we're not here supporting violence, but this was just like discipline. He had to be shown uh, what his father truly meant, because the words was just not sinking in.
Mm, We get that quite often with us. Sometimes you got to be, for us, we learn more from experience. We got to be
Exactly.
shown. So
Exactly.
for us having, like it's my purpose is in communication, but that don't mean we always talking. Mm-mm. That nonverbal communication pretty strong. I was tripping because I was just talking to my brother earlier, and one of the things I told him is be a man of action, right?
Mm,
And like use your words, say something. And he had commented. I was posting like different foods that I've been eating, more healthy foods to lose weight and stuff. And I got some fruit, and like he'll comment like that looks good. Sure, wish I had some. I don't even got no fruit here. I'm like, are you asking me for some fruit? And he like, I mean, that would be cool, I would like some. So are you asking me for some fruit? Do you want some fruit? Like, do I? I'm not about to be the one to ask you. You know what I'm saying? Like you playing big boy right now. Like use your big boy. You know what I'm saying? And I said, are you? After I asked him like 3 times, are you asking me? He was like, yes. I mean, I could send you a. He got smart. Like I could send you a list. I want some apples, some oranges, and I like the pineapples. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, I'm gonna fight you. I'm about to whoop your ass because you playing with me. You know what I'm saying? But that's what I'm talking about. It's like, like even if there was, physical altercation, the communication should still be there. And where does it come from? The intention. And those are things that you can pick up at any age, but I think should be associated with a man's upbringing. Because, like Quan said, like we wouldn't have this like losing sight of the value of life. So you so easily and willingly to lose yours or have someone else lose theirs. And we
so now,
value it to the core.
there's just a valuable lesson that I teach. That where we get that phrase from. I know Bill Cosby had it in a special one time, and we've heard mothers and fathers say this all the time. Where it was, um, "I brought you into this world. I take you out."
Check it out. Yeah.
So I like to speak on that. In ancient Eastern cultures, the only person having babies is women,
Hmm.
right? I don't think we can get around that, right?
Hmm.
Um, if a mother did not participate in her son's execution, we went to trial, he was found guilty. If the mother did not participate in it, you cannot take that child's life. I don't care what that child did.
Hmm.
So that's where that phrase kind of comes from. I brought you into this world and I'll take you out.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of men, we got to get hip to that understanding. Like, that's some mother's child.
Right. Come on now.
You did not bring that world, you did not bring that life into this world. You have no right to take it out of this world.
Come on now.
So again, we can go through all of the corrective steps, hands, we can go through, but again, it's not your place to take someone's life.
Love. Love, man. I think that's enough for the night, guys. I don't want to cut us short. We are cooking, as Quanton said. And we can always go. Y'all gotta understand these big old Leos, and with these big old purposes and all these big old experiences we can have big old conversations. But that's what I wanted to bring to the forefront for you guys. Thank you, Doc Rob. Let the people know they can get in touch with you, what they expect from you, and what's some of the things that are you brewing up that you cooking over there. Let them cook, and just let the people know something good before we head out.
So I think this book that I wrote is actually suited for men. It's titled Breaking Chains, Building Futures. So that book really is an introduction to some of the works that I'm putting together. That book really talks a little bit more about myself, my upbringing, but then throughout each book, like it starts off with an African proverb and ends with an African proverb. So by me teaching African history, world history, I incorporated that within the book. So again, there are some ancient teachings, sacred teachings that are included within that book. So I think for men's mental health, I think my life can be a good example, or just something that positive that can feed off of and actually improve upon. Because again, I already know that I don't have every answer, um, but I do say that I have overcome a lot. But all of that is really broken down into that book. So I really say that that will be one thing that I want to recommend for everyone to check me out. Is made available through Amazon. That link I think might be in the description below. As Brother Pratt was saying, the Robert Utley Show. This is a podcast I started a few years back, and it started off as the first 1, 2 seasons of me just saying a lot. It was just me speaking. Around season 3, I began to incorporate guest speakers. Brother Tresvon Pratt here was a guest. A great episode. But I was talking with teachers, clinical physicians, artists. So it was a great opportunity for me to see what the people in the streets were thinking about not only themselves, but at the same time, the realms of things Africanness, African American. And, it was a great conversation. And the new season that's going to be starting this year that I'm working on is entitled Study the Bible, Not Bible Study.
Mm,
One thing, is that again, we was back in the day up to the 17th, 18th century. When you came down to history class, the Bible was the source of history. So a lot of people relate to Christianity or Islam or Hindu Buddhism as a history. But since then, we've began to incorporate real life events in a sense of people's experiences, wars, peace times. So I say all that to say is that it'd be great to know where the Bible comes from. What was happening when the Bible was being written? Who are these individuals? What is the setting? Sometimes it's just not so much as taking people for their word without really understanding where they came from.
mm,
So that's what this season is going to be all about. So please check me out on the Robert Utley Show. The link that Brother Pratt was speaking about is an episode, but at the same time, it's available on Apple Podcasts. So you can check it out there as well if you're more into that. But Spotify is the main one that I load up onto. And then, so this online course that I'm coming up with, it's the 42 Laws of My Art. Um, and then there's going to be the signature course. So it's actually a 42-week course. You can complete it as soon as you want to, or you could do one a week. Again, that'll take you up to 42 weeks. But I'm paying homage by the number 42 in honor of my aunt. These are sometimes spoken of as the negative confessions, where you're talking about yourself in the first person, not in the second. I have not. So again, it's about holding yourself accountable, but it's an internal journey that one can take and understandings by through ancient teachings and sacred rituals on what it means to really know thyself, to really address that inner self that sometimes we are having challenges with. I think a lot of us are comfortable in the physical realm. We know how much money we need to make. We know what type of environment we want to live in, what type of neighborhood we're going to live in, what kind of car I want to drive. So a lot of us is comfortable in the physical realm, but a lot of us are still having their questions on the spiritual realm. So that's where these internal questions being asked, I think, is going to really improve that understanding of oneself. So those are some of the things that I have now and things that I'm working on. So, Brother Pratt, I appreciate all the love, brother. We talk on a regular basis. I love building with you, brother. So please up with what you're doing. You're doing a great thing for the community. Anything I could do to be supportive, you already know I got you. So again, I want to be thankful for this opportunity. Thankful to the ancestors known and unknown. I want to say Ashe, but love you, brother, always. And again, yeah, I'm just very thankful. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. I love you. So yes, this will not be the last time you see Doc Rob and I collabing. Stay tuned. We do got some things in the works. But as of right now, I'm gonna let you get back to your beings, your doings. You have a good night, my good man, and we'll be talking.
Right. Hotel.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. The rites of passage from boyhood to manhood, from child to adult. I think we all was able to get a lot from that. Thank you for everybody that's been tuning in, commenting, participating. We got a lot more in the works. You let me know how or what topics need to be discussed for this month. Is Men's Mental Health Month. What do men need to know about men's mental health? Okay, let me know if you'd like to be a guest as well. Please do not hesitate to contact me here. Comments. I got the Facebook group. It's a private group. You do have to answer a few preliminary questions to be accepted in, but we're on Facebook. Come on over. Instagram, you can DM me, so forth, so on. Thank y'all for tuning in. Stay tuned for what I got in the future. We got another powerful guest coming on. You'll see that premiere. Go ahead and subscribe. Much love. Peace.